Emotion moves quickly. Faster than judgment. Faster than discipline. A comment appears. A problem appears. A feeling rises. Most people react immediately. They follow the emotion. They defend the feeling. They lose control. Emotional discipline begins with interruption. Pause before reacting. Observe before speaking. Control before expression. Because power does not belong to the loudest reaction. Power belongs to the person who remains in control. Emotion moves quickly. Faster than thought. Faster than discipline. Something happens. A word is spoken. A problem appears. A message arrives. Emotion rises immediately. Most people react in the same moment. They speak. They defend. They escalate. They call this honesty. They call this authenticity. In reality, it is lack of control. That's the key. Immediate reaction hands control to emotion. When you react instantly, the emotion decides your behavior. Anger chooses your words. Fear chooses your decisions. Frustration chooses your tone. In those moments, you are not in control. The situation controls you. You have a choice. React immediately. Or pause deliberately. Most people never experience the pause. Emotion appears. Reaction follows. The gap between the two disappears. Emotional discipline begins when you restore that gap. The pause changes everything. A brief moment of stillness interrupts escalation. Escalation thrives on speed. Emotion accelerates quickly. Thoughts multiply. Interpretations grow dramatic. Within seconds, the mind becomes loud. Stillness slows the process. When you pause, your nervous system begins to regulate. Breathing slows. Muscle tension decreases. The body moves away from emotional urgency. Clarity begins to return. Clarity protects discipline. Many people believe reacting quickly shows strength. They believe immediate response proves confidence. In truth, it proves impulse. Controlled individuals do not rush. They observe. They evaluate. Then they respond deliberately. Deliberate response creates authority. Authority strengthens discipline. Reactive behavior weakens it. You do not need their permission to pause. Even when someone expects an answer. Even when tension increases. Even when silence feels uncomfortable. Your discipline is internal. Stillness gives you time to observe what actually happened. When emotion dominates the moment, perception becomes distorted. You assume intention. You exaggerate meaning. You interpret tone as hostility. Reaction turns assumption into action. Action then creates unnecessary conflict. Stillness prevents this pattern. When you pause, you examine the situation calmly. You separate fact from interpretation. Facts are stable. Interpretations are emotional. Someone may speak abruptly. The fact is tone. The interpretation may be disrespect. That interpretation may be wrong. Immediate reaction treats interpretation as truth. Discipline waits for clarity. This pause protects your authority. Authority over yourself is the foundation of emotional discipline. Most emotional regret comes from reacting too quickly. A message sent too fast. A word spoken in frustration. A decision made during anger. These moments damage relationships. They damage credibility. They damage self-respect. Reaction creates the mistake. Stillness prevents it. Stillness is not hesitation. Stillness is strategic. Strategic individuals slow the moment before acting. They gather information. They understand the context. They respond with intention. This calm precision produces better outcomes. Better outcomes reinforce discipline. It's not about suppression. It's about discipline. Emotion will still appear. Emotion will still feel intense. Discipline simply prevents emotion from controlling behavior. You observe the emotion. You regulate the reaction. You choose the response. That distinction creates stability. You must train this behavior repeatedly. Every irritation becomes practice. Every disagreement becomes practice. Every stressful moment becomes practice. Pause. Observe. Slow your breathing. Then respond deliberately. Each repetition strengthens discipline. Discipline stabilizes identity. Identity shapes behavior. Behavior shapes outcomes. Over time, reaction loses urgency. Emotion still appears. But it no longer dominates the moment. You remain steady. Steady individuals see clearly. Clear perception improves decisions. Better decisions strengthen discipline. You have a choice. Allow emotion to command your behavior. Or develop the discipline to pause before reacting. The pause protects clarity. Clarity protects discipline. Discipline creates calm authority. Emotional discipline begins with this simple action. Stop reacting instantly. Create space between feeling and response. Let stillness interrupt emotional momentum. Control begins in that quiet moment. You learned how reaction transfers control to emotion. Now you must understand something deeper. Emotions themselves often misinterpret reality. Before you obey them, you must question them. Emotion feels convincing. It appears suddenly. It feels urgent. Most people assume that strong emotion means something must be true. They feel anger and believe they were attacked. They feel fear and believe danger is real. They feel frustration and believe something is unfair. They rarely question the feeling. That is the mistake. That's the key. Emotion is a signal. It is not always accurate. Most emotional reactions are based on interpretation, not fact. Your mind observes a situation. It quickly assigns meaning. Emotion follows that meaning. If the interpretation is wrong, the emotion will also be wrong. But when people believe the emotion immediately, the reaction becomes automatic. Automatic reaction weakens discipline. You have a choice. Believe every emotion. Or question it before acting. Most people never question emotional signals. They feel something and assume it must be correct. This habit creates instability. Emotion becomes authority. Authority over behavior shifts away from discipline. Stillness restores control. When emotion appears, pause. Do not obey it immediately. Observe it. Notice the physical sensation. Notice the thoughts forming around it. Notice the urge to react. Observation weakens emotional momentum. Momentum depends on speed. Slow the process and clarity returns. Clarity protects discipline. Many emotional reactions come from incomplete information. Someone sends a short message. You assume disrespect. Someone delays a response. You assume rejection. Someone challenges an idea. You assume hostility. These interpretations happen instantly. Reaction turns interpretation into behavior. Behavior creates conflict. Stillness interrupts this chain. When you pause, you allow your mind to gather more information. You evaluate the situation calmly. You examine what actually happened. Facts remain stable. Interpretations are flexible. When you separate the two, emotional distortion weakens. You do not need their permission to question your emotions. Even when the feeling feels powerful. Intensity does not equal accuracy. Fear can exaggerate risk. Anger can exaggerate offense. Excitement can exaggerate opportunity. Emotion magnifies perception. Magnification distorts judgment. If you act during distortion, you lose control. Stillness restores balance. Balanced minds evaluate calmly. Calm evaluation strengthens discipline. Most emotional mistakes happen when people obey feelings without examination. They react too quickly. They defend themselves unnecessarily. They escalate situations that required patience. All because the emotional signal was accepted without question. Questioning emotion does not mean ignoring it. Emotion still carries information. It signals that something deserves attention. But attention does not require immediate action. You examine the signal. You slow your breathing. You allow the mind to settle. Then you decide what response is appropriate. This pattern strengthens emotional discipline. Over time, something changes. Emotion still appears, but it loses authority. You no longer assume every feeling requires reaction. You examine it first. That small shift changes everything. Your behavior becomes calmer. Your decisions become clearer. Your presence becomes steadier. Steady individuals create stability in difficult situations. Others may react emotionally. You remain composed. That composure becomes influence. Influence strengthens authority. Authority reinforces discipline. Everything connects. It's not about suppression. It's about discipline. Discipline examines emotion before responding. Emotion suggests. Discipline decides. You have a choice. Allow emotion to control behavior. Or train yourself to question emotional signals. The calm mind always asks one question first. Is this feeling accurate? When you ask that question, reaction slows. Clarity returns. Discipline becomes stronger. You stopped reacting instantly. Now you understand that emotions themselves can mislead perception. Next, you must learn to control something that quietly amplifies emotion. Your attention. Because attention determines which emotions grow stronger. Attention directs emotion. What you focus on grows stronger. Most people never notice this process. Something small happens. A comment. A mistake. A moment of tension. The mind begins to replay it. Attention locks onto the event. The replay strengthens the emotion. Anger grows. Frustration grows. Anxiety grows. Nothing new has happened. Only attention has changed. That's the key. Emotion feeds on attention. The longer the mind focuses on the emotional trigger, the stronger the feeling becomes. This is why some people remain calm while others escalate. The event may be identical. The difference is attention. Undisciplined attention magnifies emotion. Disciplined attention regulates it. You have a choice. Continue feeding the emotional reaction. Or redirect your attention deliberately. Most emotional escalation happens inside the mind. The event passes quickly. But attention keeps the moment alive. The mind replays the conversation. Replays the tone. Replays the perceived insult. Each replay strengthens the emotional pattern. This creates the illusion that the situation is still happening. But it is not. Attention is recreating it. Stillness interrupts this process. When you pause and observe your attention, you begin to see where the emotion is coming from. Not from the situation. From repeated focus. You do not need their permission to redirect attention. Even if the mind wants to continue replaying the moment. Attention is a skill. Like any skill, it can be trained. Training begins with awareness. Notice when your mind returns to the same emotional event repeatedly. Notice the tension increasing. Notice the urge to justify the reaction. This awareness weakens the automatic loop. Once you see the pattern, you can interrupt it. You slow your breathing. You shift your attention to something stable. Your posture. Your environment. Your breathing rhythm. This small shift changes your nervous system. The emotional loop begins to weaken. Clarity returns. Clarity strengthens discipline. Many people believe emotional control means suppressing feeling. That belief is incorrect. Emotion does not need suppression. It needs disciplined attention. Attention determines emotional intensity. If attention stays locked on irritation, irritation grows. If attention moves to calm observation, the nervous system stabilizes. Stillness allows attention to reset. The calm mind chooses where to focus. Reactive minds allow attention to wander into emotional escalation. This difference separates discipline from impulse. Impulsive attention chases emotional stimulation. Disciplined attention returns to stability. It's not about emotion. It's about discipline. When attention becomes deliberate, emotion loses momentum. You stop feeding emotional loops. You stop replaying situations unnecessarily. You stop magnifying small problems. This creates emotional stability. Stable individuals do not waste attention on every irritation. They evaluate quickly. If the situation requires action, they respond deliberately. If the situation does not matter, they redirect attention immediately. This prevents emotional accumulation. Accumulated emotion leads to exhaustion. Exhausted minds react more easily. Disciplined attention prevents this build-up. Your energy remains stable. Your reactions remain measured. Your presence becomes steady. Steady attention produces calm authority. People trust calm authority. They feel it in your presence. You are not easily pulled into emotional reactions. You observe. You evaluate. You respond only when necessary. That composure influences others. Influence strengthens discipline. Discipline reinforces emotional stability. Everything begins with attention. You have a choice. Allow attention to feed emotional reactions. Or direct attention deliberately. Directing attention weakens emotional escalation. Weak escalation restores clarity. Clarity strengthens discipline. You learned how emotional signals can mislead perception. You learned how attention can magnify emotion. Now you must confront a deeper habit. The habit of identifying with emotion itself. Because the moment you believe the emotion is who you are, discipline collapses. Emotion appears quickly. Sometimes without warning. A comment triggers irritation. A mistake triggers frustration. A challenge triggers anger. These reactions feel personal. The mind says, I am angry. I am anxious. I am frustrated. The language seems harmless. But it creates a powerful mistake. It merges identity with emotion. That's the key. When emotion becomes identity, discipline disappears. Because identity feels permanent. Emotion is temporary. Most people never question this habit. They feel something and immediately assume it defines them. They believe the feeling must guide their behavior. But emotion is only a signal passing through the nervous system. It rises. It peaks. It fades. Identity remains stable. Emotional discipline begins when you separate the two. You have a choice. Become the emotion. Or observe it. Observation restores control. When anger appears, you notice it. You do not become it. When frustration rises, you observe it. You do not obey it. This shift is subtle. But it is powerful. Most people say, I am angry. Disciplined individuals say, anger is present. The difference changes behavior. In the first statement, emotion controls identity. In the second statement, identity observes emotion. Observation weakens emotional authority. Stillness strengthens observation. When you pause, you create space between emotion and identity. That space gives discipline room to operate. Without that space, emotion becomes the decision maker. You do not need their permission to step back from emotion. Even if the emotion feels strong. Even if the situation feels urgent. Strength does not come from reacting. Strength comes from remaining steady. Steady individuals understand something most people ignore. Emotion is movement. Identity is stability. If you attach identity to movement, you become unstable. Your behavior shifts constantly. One moment calm. The next moment reactive. One moment confident. The next moment defensive. This instability weakens authority. Authority comes from consistency. Consistency comes from discipline. And discipline requires identity to remain separate from emotion. Many emotional conflicts escalate because people defend their emotions as if they were defending themselves. Someone challenges an opinion. Emotion appears. Instead of observing it, the person identifies with it. Now disagreement feels like attack. Reaction becomes inevitable. Stillness prevents this mistake. When emotion appears, pause. Notice it. Label it internally. Anger is present. Frustration is present. Disappointment is present. Then breathe slowly. Allow the nervous system to settle. Once emotion is observed, it begins to weaken. Observation removes urgency. Without urgency, discipline becomes possible. Disciplined individuals do not deny emotion. They simply refuse to become it. Emotion informs. Discipline decides. It's not about emotion. It's about discipline. Emotion will always appear. But behavior must remain deliberate. Over time, this practice changes how your mind responds to emotional triggers. Emotion still arises. But it no longer dominates the moment. It becomes information rather than command. This creates emotional stability. Stable individuals respond with clarity even in stressful situations. Others may react. You remain steady. Steadiness becomes authority. Authority influences the environment around you. People sense the difference. They notice the calm. They notice the control. They notice the discipline. All of it begins with a simple understanding. You are not your emotions. You are the observer of them. The observer chooses behavior. The observer protects discipline. You have a choice. Merge with every emotion that appears. Or step back and observe it. Observation protects identity. Identity protects discipline. And discipline creates emotional stability. You learned how to separate identity from emotion. Now you must strengthen another critical skill. Emotional silence. Because not every emotion deserves expression. Emotion wants expression. It pushes outward. Anger wants words. Frustration wants explanation. Disappointment wants reaction. The urge feels strong. It feels honest. It feels necessary. Most people follow this urge immediately. They speak. They defend. They release the emotion through words or actions. They believe this is healthy. In reality, it often weakens discipline. That's the key. Not every emotion deserves expression. Expression without control creates unnecessary consequences. A reaction may feel justified in the moment, but the result often creates regret. Words spoken quickly cannot be retrieved. Actions taken emotionally cannot be undone. Silence protects discipline. You have a choice. Express every emotion. Or observe it without speaking.
Most emotional situations do not require immediate response.
But emotional impulse pushes for reaction. Impulse says speak now. Impulse says defend now. Impulse says prove your point now. Discipline says pause. Discipline says observe. Discipline says wait. Waiting weakens emotional intensity. Emotion depends on speed. If expression is delayed, intensity begins to drop. Breathing slows. The mind regains clarity.
The situation becomes easier to evaluate.
Stillness creates this shift. When you pause instead of reacting, you interrupt the emotional impulse. You allow the nervous system to regulate. Regulation restores perspective. Perspective strengthens discipline.
You do not need their permission to remain silent.
Even when someone expects an immediate answer. Even when silence feels uncomfortable. Silence is not weakness. Silence is control. Controlled individuals do not rush to fill every moment with words. They observe first.
They evaluate the situation. Then they decide whether a response is necessary.
Often it is not. Many conflicts escalate simply because someone felt the need to respond emotionally. One reaction invites another. One accusation invites defense. One emotional statement creates another. The cycle grows quickly. Silence breaks the cycle. Without reaction, escalation weakens.
The emotional energy loses momentum.
Calm presence stabilizes the situation.
This skill becomes powerful over time.
When others expect reaction and receive calm silence instead, the emotional dynamic changes. You remain steady.
They begin to regulate their own reaction.
Your discipline influences the environment. Influence strengthens authority.
Authority reinforces discipline.
It's not about suppression. It's about discipline. Suppressing emotion means forcing it away. Discipline means observing it without obeying it. The emotion is still present.
You simply choose not to express it impulsively.
This distinction protects clarity. Clarity produces stronger responses.
When you finally speak, your words carry intention.
They are precise. They are calm. They are measured. This increases credibility. People listen more carefully when your words are deliberate. Constant emotional expression weakens credibility. Controlled speech strengthens it. Most people talk too quickly during emotional moments. They explain too much. They defend too much. They reveal too much.
Later they wish they had remained silent.
Silence protects your position. Silence allows observation. Observation reveals information. Information improves judgment. Judgment strengthens discipline.
Disciplined individuals speak less during emotional tension.
They wait until clarity returns.
Then they respond with precision.
This creates stability. Stable behavior builds emotional authority. Emotional authority changes how people interact with you. They sense that you are not easily pulled into reaction. They sense that your behavior is deliberate. This steadiness commands respect. Respect strengthens discipline. You have a choice. Follow the impulse to express emotion immediately.
Or pause and remain silent.
Silence allows emotion to settle. Settled emotion allows clarity. Clarity produces disciplined behavior. Over time, this habit becomes automatic. Emotion appears. Impulse pushes for reaction.
But discipline steps in first.
You pause. You observe. You remain silent.
The emotional moment passes.
Your authority remains intact. You learned how silence weakens emotional impulse. But silence alone is not enough. True emotional discipline requires something deeper. You must regulate the internal intensity of emotion itself. Emotion rises in the body before it appears in behavior. Heart rate increases. Breathing becomes shallow. Muscles tighten. Thoughts accelerate. These physical signals appear quickly, often before you realize what is happening. Most people ignore these signals. They only notice the emotion once it becomes strong.
By that point, reaction already feels inevitable.
That's the key. Emotional discipline begins before reaction.
It begins with regulating intensity early. When the body calms, the emotion weakens.
When the body accelerates, emotion strengthens. You have a choice. Allow emotional intensity to grow,
or regulate it deliberately. Most people unknowingly amplify emotion through their own physiology.
Their breathing becomes fast. Their posture tightens.
Their voice becomes sharper.
These physical reactions feed the emotional state. Emotion grows stronger. Reaction becomes more likely. Stillness interrupts this escalation. The moment you notice emotional tension, pause. Do not react. Focus on the body. Slow the breath. Inhale slowly. Exhale longer.
Breathing directly influences the nervous system.
Longer exhalation signals safety to the body. When the nervous system feels safe, emotional intensity decreases. Clarity begins to return. Clarity strengthens discipline. You do not need their permission to regulate your state. Even if the situation feels stressful. Even if others around you react emotionally. Your nervous system belongs to you. Control over it creates authority. Posture also affects emotional intensity. When emotion rises, the body often contracts. Shoulders tighten. Jaw clenches. Hands tense.
These signals communicate threat to the brain.
The brain responds by amplifying emotional urgency.
If you relax the posture deliberately, the brain receives a different message.
Calm posture signals stability. Stability weakens emotional escalation.
This shift may seem small, but it changes the entire emotional trajectory. Disciplined individuals train themselves to notice these signals early. They notice the breath changing.
They notice muscle tension. They notice emotional momentum building. Once awareness appears, regulation becomes possible. Without awareness, reaction becomes automatic. Regulation requires deliberate action. Slow breathing. Relaxed posture. Still observation.
These behaviors calm the nervous system.
A calm nervous system reduces emotional intensity. Reduced intensity restores clarity. Clarity strengthens discipline. It's not about emotion. It's about discipline. Emotion may appear strong, but discipline regulates its intensity. This creates emotional resilience.
Resilient individuals recover quickly from emotional triggers.
They do not remain agitated for long periods. They calm their system deliberately.
The emotional wave passes.
Their behavior remains steady.
Many emotional conflicts continue simply because emotional intensity remains high.
Two people react. Both nervous systems accelerate. Both feel urgency.
Neither pauses to regulate.
The situation escalates. But if one person slows the nervous system, the dynamic changes. Calm begins to influence the environment.
Others often begin to regulate unconsciously.
Your stability becomes contagious. This influence is powerful. It creates leadership without words. Calm leadership strengthens discipline. Discipline reinforces emotional stability. Over time, regulation becomes automatic. The moment tension appears, you begin breathing slower. Your posture stabilizes. Your voice remains calm. Your attention sharpens. Emotion still appears, but it never reaches destructive intensity. You remain composed. This composure builds internal authority. Authority over your state protects your decisions. Better decisions strengthen discipline. You have a choice. Allow emotional intensity to grow uncontrollably,
or regulate it deliberately.
Regulation weakens escalation. Weak escalation restores clarity. Clarity strengthens emotional discipline.
You learned how to regulate emotional intensity inside the body.
Now you must confront another habit that destabilizes emotion.
The habit of overinterpreting situations. Because the mind often creates emotional problems that never existed.
Most emotional reactions do not come from events. They come from interpretation. Something happens. A message arrives. A conversation ends abruptly. A comment sounds sharp. The event is simple.
The mind begins adding meaning.
Maybe they are angry. Maybe they are disrespecting you. Maybe they are rejecting you. These assumptions appear instantly. Emotion follows the interpretation. That's the key. Emotion does not react to reality. Emotion reacts to the story the mind creates. Most people never examine this process. They assume their interpretation is correct. They react immediately. Reaction strengthens the interpretation. The interpretation then feels confirmed. This cycle creates emotional instability. You have a choice. Believe the first interpretation your mind creates, or examine it calmly. Stillness allows examination.
Without stillness, the mind rushes forward.
The mind wants explanation. It wants certainty.
When information is incomplete, the mind fills the gap with imagination. Imagination often favors negative explanations.
This pattern evolved for survival. But in modern life, it creates unnecessary emotional reactions. Someone sends a short message. The mind interprets the tone as irritation. Emotion appears. But the reality may be simple. They may be busy. They may be distracted. They may simply be brief.
The mind did not wait to confirm the facts.
It reacted to interpretation. Discipline interrupts this habit. When you notice emotional reaction forming, pause. Ask one simple question. What actually happened? Focus on observable facts. Words spoken. Actions taken. Messages written. Facts are stable. Interpretations are assumptions. When you separate the two, emotional distortion weakens. You do not need their permission to question your interpretation.
Even if the emotion feels convincing.
Even if your mind insists the interpretation is correct. Discipline requires examination. Examination restores clarity. Clarity stabilizes emotion. Overinterpretation creates unnecessary tension.
It magnifies small situations.
It turns neutral events into emotional conflicts. Most people exhaust themselves with this habit. They analyze every tone. They analyze every pause. They analyze every expression. Emotion becomes constant. Stability disappears. Disciplined individuals avoid this trap. They gather information before reacting. They allow time for context to appear. Time often reveals that the interpretation was wrong. Many emotional reactions would disappear if people waited longer before reacting. But emotional urgency pushes the mind to act immediately. Urgency creates mistakes. Stillness weakens urgency.
When you pause, interpretation loses authority.
You examine calmly. You observe the situation objectively. Then you decide if action is necessary. Often it is not. Most situations resolve themselves once emotional interpretation fades. This discipline preserves energy. Energy is important. Emotional overanalysis drains mental focus. It consumes attention. It creates unnecessary stress.
When you stop overinterpreting situations, your mind becomes quieter. The mind focuses only on what matters. This quiet focus strengthens emotional stability. Stable individuals remain calm because they do not create emotional problems through imagination.
They respond only to reality,
Not to speculation.
not to assumption. Reality is manageable. Speculation is endless.
You have a choice.
Allow the mind to invent emotional meaning in every situation.
Or train yourself to observe facts first.
Observation protects discipline. Discipline protects emotional stability. Over time, the mind becomes calmer. Interpretation slows. Emotion weakens. Reaction becomes deliberate.
You become more difficult to provoke.
Provocation loses power when interpretation disappears. This strengthens emotional authority.
Authority over your perception strengthens discipline. You learned how interpretation creates unnecessary emotion.
Now you must strengthen another important skill:
the ability to maintain emotional stability even when pressure increases. Pressure reveals discipline. Anyone can remain calm when situations are easy. When conditions are comfortable.
When expectations are low. Calm during comfort requires little effort.
But pressure changes everything.
Deadlines appear. Mistakes happen.
Conflict increases.
Uncertainty grows.
Emotion begins to rise.
Heart rate increases. Thoughts accelerate. The mind searches for control. Most people lose stability in these moments. They react faster. They speak louder. They think less clearly.
Pressure exposes the absence of emotional discipline.
That's the key. Calm under pressure is trained behavior. It does not appear automatically.
It is practiced repeatedly.
You have a choice. Allow pressure to control your emotional state.
Or remain steady when difficulty increases.
Most people interpret pressure as threat.
Their nervous system reacts as if survival is at risk.
Breathing becomes shallow. Muscles tighten. Focus narrows. Emotion intensifies. This reaction makes clear thinking difficult. Mistakes increase. Conflict escalates. Disciplined individuals respond differently. They treat pressure as information, not as danger. Information can be evaluated calmly. Danger creates panic. Panic destroys discipline. Stillness interrupts the panic response. When pressure rises, the first action is simple. Pause. Slow the breath. Allow the nervous system to stabilize.
You do not need their permission to remain calm.
Even if others are reacting emotionally.
Even if the situation feels urgent.
Urgency often creates unnecessary mistakes. Calm restores precision. Precision protects discipline. Calm individuals make better decisions during pressure.
They observe the situation clearly. They identify what truly matters.
They ignore distractions. This focused attention prevents emotional escalation. Pressure becomes manageable. Most people believe pressure requires faster reaction.
They rush to solve the problem.
They rush to defend themselves.
They rush to restore control.
But speed without clarity creates confusion. Confusion increases emotional intensity. Stillness reverses this pattern.
When you slow down, clarity returns.
Clarity reveals the next step. Often the situation is less severe than it appeared. Emotion exaggerated the urgency. Once emotion settles, solutions become visible. This calm evaluation is powerful.
People trust individuals who remain steady during pressure.
Steady behavior signals competence. Competence builds authority. Authority strengthens discipline.
Over time, calm becomes your default response.
Pressure no longer disrupts your thinking.
Instead, it activates focus. Your attention becomes sharper.
Your movements become deliberate.
Your communication becomes controlled.
Others may escalate emotionally. You remain composed. This composure influences the environment. When one person remains calm, emotional escalation often decreases. Your stability becomes a reference point. Others begin to slow their reactions. The situation stabilizes. This influence is subtle but powerful. Calm leadership requires emotional discipline. Discipline requires control over reaction. Reaction must never dominate behavior. It's not about pressure. It's about discipline. Pressure simply reveals whether discipline exists. If discipline is weak, pressure exposes it immediately. If discipline is strong, pressure strengthens your focus. Every difficult situation becomes training. Each stressful moment becomes practice. Practice builds emotional resilience. Resilient individuals recover quickly from stress. They regulate their state. They focus on solutions. They avoid emotional escalation. This stability creates consistent performance. Consistent performance builds confidence. Confidence reinforces discipline. You have a choice. Allow pressure to destabilize your emotions. Or train yourself to remain calm under stress. Calm weakens emotional escalation. Weak escalation restores clarity. Clarity strengthens emotional discipline. You learned how to remain calm under pressure. Now you must strengthen the next level of emotional control. The ability to remain stable even when others lose their control. Emotions spread quickly. One person reacts. Another person responds. Soon the entire situation becomes emotional. Anger invites anger. Frustration invites frustration. Defensiveness invites defensiveness. Most people are pulled into this pattern automatically. They mirror the emotional energy around them. They match tone. They match intensity. They match reaction. In moments like this, discipline disappears. That's the key. Emotional discipline means refusing to mirror emotional chaos. Just because someone reacts emotionally does not mean you must do the same. You have a choice. Follow the emotional energy in the room. Or remain steady while others escalate. Most people struggle with this skill. When someone raises their voice, they raise theirs. When someone becomes defensive, they defend harder. When someone reacts with anger, anger feels justified. The reaction becomes contagious. But emotional discipline breaks this chain. Stillness interrupts emotional contagion. When someone reacts strongly, the first instinct is to respond. The urge feels immediate. The body prepares for confrontation. But disciplined individuals pause. They observe the reaction. They regulate their breathing. They slow their response. You do not need their permission to remain calm. Even if someone is emotional. Even if someone is blaming you. Even if someone is speaking aggressively. Their reaction belongs to them. Your behavior belongs to you. When you remember this distinction, discipline becomes possible. Emotional stability requires independence from other people's reactions. Most emotional escalation happens because two people react at the same time. One reaction triggers another. The intensity grows. The situation becomes chaotic. But if one person remains calm, the escalation weakens. Without emotional resistance, emotional energy loses momentum. This is not weakness. It is control. Control allows you to evaluate the situation clearly. While others react emotionally, you observe. Observation reveals useful information. You see the real issue. You notice what triggered the reaction. You identify what actually matters. This clarity allows you to respond effectively. Reactive individuals lose this advantage. Emotion clouds their perception. They respond impulsively. Impulsive responses often create more conflict. Calm responses stabilize the situation. Calm communication slows emotional escalation. A steady tone weakens emotional intensity. A measured response reduces defensiveness. Over
time, the emotional temperature decreases.
This creates space for resolution.
Disciplined individuals often become stabilizing forces in tense situations.
Their calm presence changes the dynamic.
Others begin to regulate themselves.
The environment becomes more controlled. This influence is powerful. But it requires emotional independence. It's not about them. It's about discipline.
Their emotion cannot control your behavior unless you allow it. When you maintain stability, your authority increases.
Authority comes from composure. Composure signals confidence. Confidence reinforces discipline.
Many leaders develop this skill naturally.
They remain calm during disagreement. They listen without reacting emotionally. They respond deliberately.
This steadiness builds trust. People trust individuals who remain stable during tension.
Stability creates credibility. Credibility strengthens influence. Influence reinforces discipline.
But this skill requires practice.
Every difficult conversation becomes training. Every emotional reaction from others becomes an opportunity. Instead of reacting, observe. Instead of escalating, remain steady. Instead of defending impulsively, respond calmly.
This repetition strengthens emotional discipline.
Over time, the habit becomes automatic. Someone reacts emotionally. You remain calm. Someone becomes defensive.
You remain measured.
Someone escalates tension. You maintain clarity.
The emotional dynamic changes.
Your stability becomes stronger than their reaction. You have a choice. Join emotional chaos. Or remain steady inside it. Stability weakens escalation. Weak escalation restores clarity. Clarity strengthens discipline.
You learned how to remain stable when others react emotionally. Now you must develop the final layer of emotional discipline.
The ability to maintain calm consistently. Not just in isolated moments,
but as a permanent behavioral standard.
Calm should not be occasional. It should be normal. Most people experience calm only when circumstances are easy. When nothing challenges them.
When no one provokes them.
When pressure disappears. This is not emotional discipline. This is comfort. True discipline creates calm even when conditions are difficult. Even when emotions appear. Even when others react. That's the key. Calm must become your default state. Not something you reach occasionally, but something you maintain consistently. Most people treat calm like a temporary achievement. They calm down after reacting.
They calm down after conflict. They calm down after emotion fades.
But discipline requires something different. Discipline prevents the reaction before it begins. You have a choice. Allow calm to depend on circumstances. Or train calm to exist regardless of circumstances. Circumstances change constantly. People behave unpredictably. Situations become stressful. Emotion appears without warning. If calm depends on the situation, stability disappears quickly.
If calm comes from discipline, stability remains.
This difference creates emotional authority. Authority over your internal state. Authority over your reactions. Authority over your behavior.
Most emotional mistakes happen because calm was lost too quickly.
Someone speaks sharply. Emotion appears. Reaction follows. The situation escalates.
But when calm is the default, reaction slows.
The mind remains steady. Emotion loses power. Stillness protects this stability. Calm individuals move slower in emotional situations. Not physically slower. Mentally slower.
They observe carefully. They think before speaking.
They respond deliberately. This controlled pace prevents emotional escalation.
When calm becomes a habit, your nervous system changes. The body no longer reacts strongly to every stimulus.
Breathing remains steady.
Muscles remain relaxed.
Attention remains focused.
This physical stability supports emotional discipline.
Without physical calm, emotional control becomes difficult. Training calm requires repetition. Every irritation becomes an opportunity. Every disagreement becomes practice. Every stressful moment becomes training. Instead of reacting, pause. Observe your breathing. Observe your thoughts. Let the emotional surge pass. Then respond deliberately. Each repetition strengthens the habit. Over time, calm becomes automatic. Emotion still appears, but it no longer controls behavior. You notice the emotion. You regulate your state. You respond with clarity. You do not need their permission to remain calm. Even if someone challenges you. Even if someone disagrees with you. Even if the situation becomes tense. Calm does not depend on approval. Calm depends on discipline. Disciplined individuals understand something most people ignore. Calm creates power. When you remain steady, your thinking becomes clear. Clear thinking improves decisions. Better decisions produce stronger outcomes. Strong outcomes reinforce discipline. Emotionally reactive individuals rarely experience this clarity. Their reactions disrupt judgment. Their decisions become impulsive. Their outcomes suffer. But calm individuals maintain consistency. Consistency builds trust. Trust builds influence. Influence strengthens authority. All of it begins with calm discipline. It's not about emotion. It's about discipline. Emotion will always exist. But behavior must remain deliberate. Calm individuals protect their discipline carefully. They guard their attention. They regulate their breathing. They question their emotions. They refuse to react instantly. These habits create emotional stability. Over time, emotional discipline becomes identity. You are no longer someone who reacts impulsively. You become someone who observes first. Someone who pauses. Someone who responds deliberately. That identity shapes every interaction. Every conversation. Every decision. Every challenge. You have a choice. Allow emotion to define your behavior. Or build a disciplined calm that guides every action. Emotional discipline is not temporary control. It is permanent stability. When calm becomes your default state, emotional chaos loses power over you. And that is where true control begins. Emotion will always appear. Anger appears. Fear appears. Frustration appears. These signals are normal. What matters is control. Most people react instantly. They allow emotion to direct behavior. That choice creates instability. Emotional discipline requires something different. Pause before speaking. Slow your breathing. Observe the feeling. Then decide deliberately. Control your attention. Maintain composure under pressure. Train stillness every day. Repeat this pattern until discipline becomes identity. Because the strongest individuals are not the most emotional. They are the most controlled. Remain steady. Maintain discipline. Control your emotions.